Part 1. The most dangerous habit in the world. Your future is not being destroyed by failure. It is being destroyed by excuses. Because failure teaches, excuses repeat, and repeated excuses eventually become a life. Take a moment and think about this honestly. What is the excuse you use most often? I don't have enough time. I'm too tired. I'm not ready yet. I'll start next week. I'll begin when things settle down. Most people have one. Some people have dozens. And the dangerous part is this. The excuse usually sounds reasonable. Reasonable enough to believe. Reasonable enough to repeat. Reasonable enough to keep you exactly where you are. Now let's begin. Imagine a person standing in front of an opportunity, a better career, a business idea, a healthier lifestyle, a dream he has carried for years. The opportunity is real. The possibility is real. The desire is real. But then the excuse appears, not a loud excuse, not an obvious excuse, a quiet excuse, a convincing excuse, a comfortable excuse. And suddenly, action disappears. The dream remains. But the movement stops. This is how potential dies. Not through failure, through delay. Now here's something important. Most people think excuses protect them. They believe excuses reduce disappointment, reduce pressure, reduce responsibility. And in the short term, they do. That's why excuses are so attractive. Imagine a person saying, I didn't fail because I never really tried. At first, that statement feels safe because it protects the ego. It protects pride. It protects identity. But it also protects stagnation because the moment people stop trying, they stop growing. This is the hidden cost of excuses. They protect comfort while quietly destroying progress. Now let's go deeper. Excuses rarely appear as lies. If they did, people would reject them immediately. Instead, they appear disguised as logic. They sound intelligent, responsible, practical. That's what makes them dangerous. Now imagine someone wanting to start a business. The excuse says, you need more research, then more research, then more preparation, then more planning. And before long, years have passed. The person still has the dream, but not the action. This happens everywhere because excuses often wear the mask of wisdom. Now here's something deeper. Every excuse creates temporary relief. Think about that. When people avoid something difficult, they immediately feel better. The uncomfortable task disappears. The fear disappears. The pressure disappears. For a moment, everything feels easier. This creates a powerful cycle because the brain remembers relief, and anything that creates relief becomes tempting. Now imagine avoiding a difficult conversation. At first, you feel better. The discomfort is gone, but the problem remains. Then it grows. Now imagine avoiding financial responsibility. Again, temporary relief. But eventually, greater stress, greater difficulty, greater consequences. This is how excuses operate. They borrow peace from the future. Now let's go deeper. One of the greatest differences between successful people and unsuccessful people is how they respond to discomfort. Unsuccessful people often ask, how can I avoid this? Successful people often ask, how can I solve this? The difference seems small, but it changes everything. Now imagine two people facing the same challenge. The first person immediately searches for reasons. why something cannot be done. The second person searches for ways it might be done. One person finds excuses, the other finds options, and over time, their lives move in completely different directions. Now, here's something important. Excuses are rarely about circumstances. They are usually about interpretation. Now imagine two people waking up tired. The first person says, "I'm tired, so I can't." The second person says, "I'm tired, but I'll do what I can." Same condition, different interpretation, different outcome. This is critical because many limitations exist first in the mind. Now let's go deeper. Every excuse sends a message, not to other people, to yourself. When you repeatedly make excuses, your mind begins learning something. It learns that discomfort is a signal to stop. It learns that promises are flexible. It learns that growth is optional. And eventually, those lessons become identity. Now imagine another person. Every time an excuse appears, she notices it, questions it, challenges it, not because she enjoys difficulty, because she understands the cost. She understands that every excuse is shaping the person she is becoming. This awareness creates power because people cannot change what they refuse to notice. Now here's something deeper. The most dangerous excuses are often the most common. I don't have time. Think about that. The excuse is everywhere, and sometimes it is true. People are busy. Life is demanding. Responsibilities are real. But often, the problem is not a lack of time. It is a lack of priority. Now imagine checking your phone for 2 hours, watching videos, scrolling endlessly, consuming distraction, then saying, "I don't have time." The issue suddenly looks different. This is uncomfortable, but honesty often is, and honesty is where growth begins. Now let's go deeper. Another common excuse is, "I'm not ready." This one sounds responsible, mature, careful, but often it becomes a prison because readiness is rarely something that arrives before action. Readiness often arrives because of action. Now imagine a person waiting until he feels confident enough to start. Years pass. Nothing changes. Now imagine another person. She starts while uncertain, starts while nervous, starts while imperfect, and through action, confidence grows. This is how growth works, not before movement. Because of movement. Now here's something important. Every excuse makes today easier and tomorrow harder. That sentence may be one of the most important truths in life. Every excuse makes today easier and tomorrow harder. Because problems ignored rarely disappear. They usually grow. Now imagine pushing a small snowball. The longer it rolls, the larger it becomes. Excuses work the same way. Small avoidance becomes larger avoidance. Small delay becomes larger delay, until the challenge becomes overwhelming. Now here's something even deeper. The people who create extraordinary lives are not people with fewer excuses. They simply stop obeying them. The excuse appears, the discomfort appears. The resistance appears, but they move anyway. This is one of the greatest skills a person can develop, the ability to act despite internal resistance. Another powerful example is David Goggins. He often speaks about refusing to listen to the part of yourself that constantly searches for comfort, not because comfort is evil, because growth rarely happens there. His message is simple. The excuse will always be available. The question is whether you obey it. Now think about your own life. What excuse appears most often? What dream keeps getting postponed? What action keeps getting delayed? These questions matter deeply because excuses are rarely harmless. They quietly shape the future, one decision at a time, one delay at a time, one justification at a time. Now let's step back for a moment. This message is not about guilt. It is about awareness. The awareness that excuses have consequences, even when those consequences are invisible. In the next part, we will go even deeper. We will explore why excuses become addictive, why people defend the very habits that hurt them, and why the most successful people learn to recognize excuses before they take control. Because in the end, your future is not built by your intentions. It is built by the actions that survive your excuses. Part 2. Why excuses become addictive. The most dangerous thing about excuses is not that they sound false. It is that they sound true. That is why people defend them. And eventually, they begin living inside them. Take a moment and think about this honestly. Have you ever noticed how quickly the mind creates explanations? An opportunity appears, a challenge appears, a responsibility appears, and almost immediately, a reason appears too. A reason why now is not the right time. A reason why conditions are not ideal. A reason why success is unlikely. A reason why someone else can do it, but you cannot. This happens every day, to millions of people, and most never realize what is actually happening. Now let's begin. One of the most powerful abilities of the human mind is its ability to justify behavior. No matter what choice people make, the mind often creates a story that makes the choice feel reasonable. This can be useful, but it can also be dangerous. Because once people begin defending excuses, they stop questioning them. Now imagine a person who wants to improve his health. Deep down, he knows what he should do. Exercise more, eat better, sleep better. The solution is not mysterious, but every day, a new explanation appears. I'm too busy. I'll start next month. I've had a stressful week. And because those explanations feel valid, change never happens. This is important because excuses often survive, not because they are true, but because they are comfortable. Now here's something deeper. Excuses can become addictive, not chemically, emotionally. Think about that. Every excuse provides relief. Relief from pressure, relief from responsibility, relief from discomfort. And the brain loves relief. Now imagine postponing a difficult task. The moment you decide not to do it, stress temporarily disappears. You feel better, more relaxed, more comfortable. The brain notices this and remembers it. Soon, avoidance becomes a habit, then a pattern, then an identity. This is how excuses quietly take control. Now let's go deeper. Most people believe excuses protect them from failure, but often, excuses protect them from growth. Imagine a person standing before a challenge. The challenge might lead to success. It might lead to failure. Nobody knows. But the excuse guarantees something. No growth, no learning, no progress, no transformation. The person remains exactly where they are. And that is often the real tragedy. Because growth requires uncertainty. Excuses eliminate uncertainty by eliminating action. Now imagine another person. She feels fear. She feels doubt. She feels resistance. But she moves forward anyway. The fear does not disappear first. The action happens first. This is one of the biggest differences between people who grow and people who remain stuck. Now, here's something important. Many people spend years defending limitations. Listen carefully. Not fighting limitations, defending them. Imagine someone saying, "I'm just not disciplined. I'm not naturally confident. I'm not good at business. I'm not a leader." At first, these statements sound like observations, but over time, they become beliefs, and beliefs become boundaries. This is dangerous because people begin protecting the very limitations that hold them back. Now imagine another person. She hears the same thoughts, but instead of accepting them, she questions them. Is this really true? Or is this just a story I've repeated for years? That question creates freedom, because many limitations exist only because they are never challenged. Now let's go deeper. One of the most common excuses in the world is, "I'll start when I'm ready." It sounds responsible, careful, mature, but let's examine it honestly. Ready for what? Ready for uncertainty? Ready for difficulty? Ready for mistakes? Those things never disappear. They are part of growth. Now imagine someone learning to swim. Would waiting on the shore teach them how to swim? Of course not. The learning happens in the water. The same principle applies to life. Confidence is developed through action, not before action. Now here's something deeper. Excuses often disguise themselves as perfectionism. This catches many intelligent people. They tell themselves, "I want to do it properly. I need a better plan. I need more information." Again, those statements sound reasonable, but sometimes they hide fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of looking foolish. And because the fear remains hidden, people mistake avoidance for preparation. Years can disappear this way. Now imagine another person. She accepts imperfection, accepts mistakes, accepts learning in public. And because she acts, she improves. While others continue preparing, she continues progressing. This is powerful because imperfect action usually defeats perfect hesitation. Now let's go deeper. Another reason excuses become dangerous is because they spread. One excuse rarely stays isolated. Imagine avoiding exercise. Soon, energy declines. When energy declines, productivity declines. When productivity declines, confidence declines. One excuse creates another problem, then another, then another. This pattern appears everywhere because life is connected. Small decisions often create larger consequences. Now imagine the opposite. One positive action creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates more action. And suddenly, growth begins accelerating. This is why excuses matter so much. They influence far more than one moment. Now here's something important. Successful people are not excuse-free. They simply recognize excuses faster. The thought appears. The temptation appears. The justification appears. But they have learned something powerful. A thought is not an order. A feeling is not a command. An excuse is not a fact. This realization changes everything. Because once people stop believing every excuse, they regain control. Now imagine a person standing before a mirror. Every excuse he has repeated for years stands behind him. Every delay, Every justification, every promise postponed. The image is uncomfortable, but also empowering, because the moment people see the pattern, they can change the pattern. Awareness is where transformation begins. Now here's something even deeper. The future does not care about your excuses. The future responds to actions, not intentions, not explanations, not reasons, actions. The world rewards execution, not justification. Growth responds to effort, not excuses. This may sound harsh, but it is also liberating because it means change remains possible at any moment. Now imagine yourself 5 years from today. Would your future self be grateful for the excuses you made or for the actions you took despite them? That question matters because every excuse is writing part of your future story. Another powerful example is Jocko Willink. He often emphasizes taking ownership, not because circumstances don't matter, but because ownership creates power. Excuses surrender power. Responsibility creates it. That lesson remains timeless. Now think about your own life. Which excuse has become familiar? Which excuse appears most often? Which excuse has already cost you years? These questions matter deeply because excuses do not merely explain the present, they shape the future. In the final part, we will go even deeper. We will explore why responsibility creates freedom, why ownership is the antidote to excuses, and why the moment you stop explaining your life may be the moment you finally start changing it. Because in the end, the greatest danger of excuses is not what they say. It is what they prevent you from becoming. Part 3. The day you stop making excuses. Excuses make you feel better today. Responsibility makes your life better tomorrow. One protects comfort, the other creates change, and eventually you must choose between them. Take a moment and imagine two people. Both have the same dream, the same goal, the same desire for a better life. But over time, their futures become completely different. Why? Because one person explains, the other person acts, and that difference changes everything. Now let's begin. One of the most powerful truths in life is that excuses and responsibility cannot lead at the same time. One must dominate. If excuses dominate, growth slows. If responsibility dominates, growth begins. This is why ownership is so important, because ownership shifts attention away from blame and toward action. Now imagine a person facing a setback. Something goes wrong. A plan fails. An opportunity disappears. Immediately, two paths appear. The first path asks, "Who can I blame?" The second path asks, "What can I do now?" One path creates helplessness. The other creates power. And over time, those paths lead to very different lives. Now here's something important. Responsibility is often misunderstood. Many people think responsibility means accepting guilt for everything. But that is not what responsibility means. Responsibility means accepting influence. It means focusing on what you can control. Not because life is fair, not because circumstances do not matter, because control is where change happens. Now imagine standing in the rain. You cannot control the weather, but you can carry an umbrella. You cannot control the past, but you can influence the future. This is the mindset that changes lives. Not perfect control, meaningful control. Now let's go deeper. Excuses often grow strongest when life becomes difficult, when things go wrong, when progress slows, when motivation disappears. That is when excuses become most convincing. Now imagine climbing a mountain. Halfway up, your legs are tired. The weather is worse. The path becomes steeper. And suddenly, turning back feels reasonable, comfortable, logical. But imagine reaching the summit. Would the climb have been worth it? Most people would say yes, because difficult journeys often create meaningful rewards. The problem is, people rarely see the reward. While they are climbing, they only feel the effort. This is why so many people quit too soon. Now here's something deeper. Every excuse protects a version of you that wants to stay the same. Think about that. Growth requires change. Change requires discomfort. And discomfort threatens the identity people have become comfortable with. Now imagine a person saying, "This is just who I am." Sometimes that statement reflects truth, but sometimes it reflects surrender. A decision to stop growing, a decision to stop improving, a decision to stop challenging limitations. This is dangerous because people are often far more capable than they realize. Now imagine another person. Instead of saying, "This is who I am," she says, "This is who I am becoming." That small shift changes everything because becoming implies growth, possibility, movement, hope. Now let's go deeper. One of the greatest freedoms in life comes from ownership because ownership removes excuses. Imagine someone who takes responsibility for health, for finances, for learning, for habits, for choices. Life does not suddenly become easier, but it becomes clearer, and clarity creates progress. Now imagine another person. Everything is someone else's fault. The economy, the government, the boss, the weather, the timing, the circumstances. Even when those factors matter, nothing changes. Because blame does not create solutions. Responsibility does. This is why ownership is so powerful. It turns attention toward action. Now here's something important. Most people underestimate how much control they actually have. They focus on what they cannot change and ignore what they can. Now imagine spending years worrying about things outside your influence. How much energy would be wasted? Now imagine investing that same energy into action, into learning, into discipline, into growth. The difference would be enormous. This is one of the greatest lessons in life. Energy follows attention, and attention determines direction. Now let's go deeper. Another reason excuses are dangerous is because they steal time, not minutes, years. Think about that. Most people do not lose their dreams overnight. They lose them gradually, one delay at a time, one justification at a time, one excuse at a time. And because the losses are small, they are rarely noticed until the years are gone. Now imagine meeting your future self 10 years from now. What would that person say? Would they thank you for protecting comfort or for choosing growth? Would they be grateful for your explanations or your actions? That question matters deeply because your future self is being created right now through today's choices. Now here's something deeper. The opposite of excuses is not perfection. It is ownership. Many people avoid responsibility because they fear mistakes. But mistakes are part of growth. Every successful person has made them. Every leader, every entrepreneur, every creator, every athlete. The difference is simple. They did not use mistakes as permission to quit. They used mistakes as information. This is powerful because failure can teach. Excuses rarely do. Now imagine two people making the same mistake. The first person says, "That's why I can't." The second person says, "That's what I need to learn." One response creates limitation. The other creates growth. And growth compounds, just like excuses compound. Now let's go deeper. There comes a moment in life when every person must decide, not what they want. Most people already know what they want. The real question is, what are they willing to do? Because desire alone changes nothing. Dreams alone change nothing. Intentions alone change nothing. Action changes things. Responsibility creates action. Ownership sustains action. This is where transformation begins. Not in inspiration, not in motivation, in responsibility. Now here's something even deeper. The moment you stop making excuses, you become dangerous. Dangerous in the best possible way, because excuses can no longer control you. Comfort can no longer control you. Fear can no longer control you. You begin leading yourself, and self-leadership is one of the rarest skills in the world. Now imagine a person who takes ownership every single day. Not perfectly, but consistently. Day after day, year after year. Would that person's life look different? Of course it would. Because responsibility compounds, just like excuses do. Another powerful example is Viktor Frankl. He often wrote about the power of choice, the idea that while people cannot always control circumstances, they can control their response. That lesson remains one of the most powerful ideas ever written, because response creates direction, and direction creates destiny. Now think about your own life. What excuse needs to end today? What responsibility have you been avoiding? What action have you been postponing? These questions matter deeply, because every excuse is a vote for the life you have. And every action is a vote for the life you want. Now let's step back for a moment. This message is not about becoming perfect. You will still make mistakes. You will still struggle. You will still face difficult days. Everyone does. The goal is not perfection. The goal is ownership. The goal is refusing to let excuses write your future. Now here's the final truth. Your future is not being built by what you intend to do. It is being built by what you actually do. Every excuse delays that future. Every action brings it closer. Before we finish, ask yourself honestly, what would happen if you stopped explaining your life and started changing it? Because the life you want may be waiting on the other side of your last excuse. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take ownership, take action, take control of your future, and see you in the next story.